and welcome to the program, the last edition for this week. I'm Anne Mwawadu, right here in Lagos, Nigeria. We begin on a somber note in South Africa, where 14 peacekeepers have died in the Democratic Republic of Congo who have been repatriated home. President Cyril Ramaphosa paid tribute to the fallen heroes at the ceremony at the Air Force Base in Pretoria. Addressing the sad event, he paid tribute to the soldiers' bravery, their sacrifice in answering the call to serve in missions across the continent, as well as in international missions. President Ramaphosa also rejected calls to withdraw the country's troops from the ongoing conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
The South African National Defence Force, SANDF, has suffered one of its heaviest losses in a peacemaking mission since 2013, when 15 soldiers were killed in the Central African Republic. Now the remains of 14 South African soldiers who died in the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been repatriated. President Cyril Ramaphosa, who paid tribute to the fallen troops, officially handed over their mortal remains to their families.
On behalf of the people of the Republic of South Africa, I offer my profound and deepest sympathies.
The president dismissed calls for the withdrawal of South African forces from the DRC. The repatriation process faced several delays. Over the weekend, SANDF Admiral Prince Chabalala confirmed that the soldiers' bodies were first transported from the DRC to the United Nations logistic base in Entebbe, Uganda, before being flown home.
It's well known out there on record that Goma itself, the city, has been taken over by the M23 rebels. So we had to go through all their administrative processes to deal with the enemy process and procedures as laid out. And thank God we had the United Nations on our side.
However, defense analyst Ricardo Teixeira has criticized the handling of the operation, calling it poorly managed.
The mission was not properly planned, the troops were not properly equipped, the whole rollout of it and the initial deployment of the first batch of troops, the first 600 that went through, there were a lot of things that went wrong. I mean, for a while they were sharing 6 pit latrines, they didn't have the necessary medical facilities, they didn't have enough culinary facilities to cook and provide for the troops.
He also raised concerns about the government's lack of resources to adequately support its troops in conflict zones.
It came down to them having to buy food supplies from the locals in Goma, but they were relying on goodwill because they didn't have a safe for cash and they had no cash on hand. So for a while they were operating on an IOU. And again, you know, they were deployed without air support, they were deployed without any aerial cover, no medevac, no casevac. They didn't have the right medical equipment on the ground.
Speaking of the records, some family members of the fallen soldiers here says that the communication line from the South African National Defence Force was not effective. In fact, calls are mounting from Parliament and civil society groups for the withdrawal of the South African troops from DRC Congo. From Pretoria, South Africa, Innocent Simosa, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, South African farmers have continued to reject U.S. President Donald Trump's offer to resettle them in the United States as a result of the new law in SA on land exploration. Earlier on, Mr. Trump offered refuge to Afrikaner farmers in his row with President Cyril Ramaphosa. The issue of land expropriation in South Africa has been a challenge for decades in the country, but the recent policy passed into law allows the government to confiscate land without compensation in certain circumstances. President Trump's response to threats to cut future funding for what he termed terrible things, horrible things the country's leadership was doing. Theo De Gaja is the CEO of Southern African Agri-Initiative and the former president of the World Farmers Organization. Well, he says he has written President Trump telling him how farmers are willing to stay in their home and fight for their land, and they will appreciate some assistance in SA instead. However, black farmers in Limpopo province like Asianio Matidi says that whoever wants to go can go, so their farms can be given to those in need.
If you are in a country where you are saying it's a home and somebody say come and be a refuge and then you rush to be a refuge, something is also wrong to you because you are at home, so you don't need to solve by running away if there are issues. If we have got issues in South Africa, we have got a constitution, we have got justice that can help all those things. But anyway, anybody who wants to go, let them go. If they leave the farms, then farms will be given to those who are in need of farms. Farmers who mostly are blacks that will be able to take those farms.
I think it's a joke because they won't go. They're having it nice here, unlike many of us who are struggling because you start from base zero or minus. They start from old money accumulated from land that was stolen from black people, and they won't leave. Even those who were lobbying the U.S. to help them are saying they don't want to leave because this is still a very good place for white people. So they are not going to go. As a black person, even if I was to be offered asylum for whatever funny reason that may exist, I wouldn't go there because black people in the U.S. are still considered inferior. That's why there are all these movements about Black Lives Matter.
I've written an open letter to President Donald Trump in response of his offer to accommodate farmers, South African farmers, and specifically Afrikaner farmers in the USA. And in the letter, I said, my generation of farmers, we've been made from the soil. And because he's a fundamental patriot himself, he will understand that we don't want to leave this country. We would rather appreciate some assistance to fix this country within our lifetime. It is also not only Afrikaner farmers who are suffering because of poor policies here in South Africa. A large part of our constituency in SAI are beneficiaries of land reform. A large part of them are farming in the communal areas in South Africa, and they also feel under threat. Our partners in those areas are traditional authorities, and they fear that their land might also be at risk under this new law. We will never close that door as an option for South Africans who feel that they've reached the end of the road in their farming careers here. Because when youngsters come into our office, as they do every day, to ask, where do I begin? My dream is to be a farmer. Where do I begin? Where do I go to get a loan to buy a piece of land? And we don't know.
From South Africa, let's head to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where as fighting is still going on there, displaced families in Goma are now asking refuge in local schools that have now become temporary shelters in the war-torn city after the M23 group recently reported a takeover. At the school camp, displaced families are living in makeshift camps on the school playground, attempting to continue with their daily lives. Antoniette Benoit, a displaced mother who lost her husband in the conflict, describes the realities of life in the camp as harsh, calling on the government to intervene. The local teacher, Kakule Nzanzu, says the crisis has also severely disrupted education in the area as classrooms are occupied by refugees. The situation in Goma has worsened after M23 fighters issued a 72-hour ultimatum for displaced families to leave settlement camps and return to their villages. The United Nations Humanitarian and Coordination Agency, OCHA, confirmed the ultimatum, but they later clarified that the returns were described as voluntary. The east of DR Congo has been engulfed in fighting as armed groups and the army battle it out for control in the mineral-rich region. Meanwhile, a popular Congolese musician has been killed after filming a music video in the conflict-hit eastern town of Goma. The body of Delphine Katembo Viansky, better known as Declac Tidengo, is said to have been found in a street on Thursday with his head partially covered in blood. Idengo, who's famous for his songs critical of both the government and the rebels, was among hundreds of inmates who escaped from a prison in Goma. And that's after the M23 militants seized the city last month. But it's still not clear who is behind this killing. The musician had just released a track called Bunduki, meaning weapon in Swahili, condemning the rebel occupation in Goma. And amid the fighting in the DRC, the health minister is raising alarm over the possible spread of Mpox and other diseases. At a press briefing in Kinshasa, Samuel Roger Kamba disclosed that the health facilities have been affected and the Mpox treatment center, and this has made over 100 Mpox patients flee to devastation. Only 33 patients have been recaptured. The Minister of Public Health, Hygiene and Social Welfare also says the death known to the government is well beyond 3,000 in the Goma area. He adds that the major challenge is the effectiveness of service providers because doctors are now working all day long, bringing in exhaustion of staff. The ministry's plan now is how to send more doctors to help out. And still on the Mpox outbreak, health authorities in Sierra Leone say they have stepped up their response of this disease, which began on January the 10th in the country. Well, according to the health ministry, 85% of 20 laboratory-confirmed cases have fully recovered with no deaths recorded. A recent boost to the country's health system response came through $38,000 World Health Organization delivery of essential laboratory supplies and personal protective equipment to the National Public Health Agency, or the scientific body which is responsible for managing public health threats and emergencies. The NPHA says that these laboratory materials are essential. They have helped in preventing the spread of infectious diseases within the healthcare settings. And these resources, he adds, will strengthen the country's ability to detect and respond to Mpox cases effectively. It will also boost its resilience for future disease outbreaks. In the meantime, we go to Russia now, where tackling the HIV disease in the Central African Republic in Russia has already delivered nearly 80,000 doses of HIV medication to the country. The delivery was led by the head of the Russian House Cultural and Educational Center, Dmitry Sitye, who handed over 77,980 doses of HIV medication to the country in the capital, Bangui. CAR's President Faustin also and the country's health minister, Pierre Somse, received this delivery, expressing gratitude to the organization for delivering the life-saving medicine. The Russian House adds that the medication will allow thousands of people to be treated for 3 months. Let's go ahead with Mauritania, where the Prime Minister now says the U.S. will be present at talks over the future of Chagos Islands, which has been the subject of a controversial deal between Mauritius and the United Kingdom. Well, last October, the UK announced that it will hand over sovereignty of the islands, known officially as the British Indian Ocean Territory, to Mauritius, but it will maintain a 99-year lease over the UK-US military air base on the largest island, Diego Garcia. The deal, which was reached with former Mauritanian president but Naveen Ragulam, who's the replacement, has now been very critical about this. Progress has been delayed to allow officials from incoming President Donald Trump's team to look at the details of this deal. The agreement struck in October, which had been greatly by the Biden administration, includes the UK paying lease payments to Mauritius for the UK-US military air base. But shortly after that deal was struck, Mauritius elected a new prime minister who now wants to reopen negotiations. Liberian President Joseph Boakai has suspended more than 450 top government officials, including ministers, for failing to declare their assets at the anti-corruption agency. According to the presidency, they will be off work without pay for a month or until they submit the required declarations. He says the officials have contravened the Code of Conduct for state officials by not being transparent about what they own. The president, who had pledged to fight corruption when he came into office last year, says the failure to comply undermined efforts to combat corruption and ensure accountability. Among those suspended are the ministers for education and health, as well as the special envoys for tourism and investment. They also include officials working for the executive mansion, the official residence of the president, and of course the county officials. The law requires that all public officers to declare their wealth before taking up their posts and when they leave positions in government. To other stories, more reactions are still trailing U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to cut funding and dismantle U.S. aid. Representatives of Rwanda's NGOs has reacted to this, saying that the move could actually foster a move towards independence and homegrown production. Although country director of Kinamba Community Project, Apiama Vumalia, admits that this could be some negative impact on the cuts to the people. She says that it would also help in developing skills that can be lifelong benefits. On January the 26th this year, U.S. President Donald Trump suspended the U.S. aid agency to review all foreign assistance programs to ensure that they are efficient and consistent with U.S. foreign policy under America First agenda. But on February the 3rd, Mr. Elon Musk, the co-chair of the Department of Government Efficiency, declared that U.S. aid was beyond repair and should be shut down. Then the Trump administration accused U.S. aid of being unresponsive to policy directives, describing it as being run by a bunch of radical lunatics.
Kinamba Community Project is NGO who helped the children, especially the very poor children and vulnerable. We help them to show that yes, they can do something, or to build them the confidence. We have looked in their family and you have seen that they don't have hope to study. So that is why Kinamba Community Project involved to help them and to give them chance also to study like others.
Our students learn to make clothes, shirts, trousers, dress, all kind of fashion. And we work for, it's a course, short course, it's a short course program. So they learn from 2 to 6 months. Then we are working with Rwanda TVET board so that they can deliver the certificate. As Rwanda, we always have what we call agaciro. We have this thing of creating something from nothing. So you have to create your own way. We have that in our mentality as youth of Rwanda. So we don't have this impossible vocabulary in our mind. So we always feel like something good will happen if you work hard. And I believe that our country, because maybe they are planning something, because they can't leave these children or these NGOs like that. If for USAID, then it's catastrophe, because many people was waiting for their support. There was these people who was receiving medicine. Many NGOs, I was talking to people, they are very disappointed.
More tributes have continued to pour in for the late former president of Namibia, Sam Nujoma, in Windhoek. The locals there, the war veterans, have paid their last respect to Nujoma as Namibia's founding father. Many are speaking of what he means to them. The first president of Namibia died 3 weeks after being hospitalized in the capital. He led the long fight of independence for South Africa in 1990 after finding Namibia's liberation movement known as the Southwest Africa People's Organization in the 1960s. He died on February the 8th at the age of 95.
As a woman in STEM, back in the days, people weren't allowed, black people weren't allowed to take most courses, especially women. But thanks to him, I can now take engineering at NAST, which I'm on my 2nd year right now. So I'm just so grateful for him. And his kindness, his way of just seeing everyone as the same. He didn't differentiate between white or black, everyone just the same, equality.
Personally, I would say his bravery, because the step he took was something that requires a lot of courage, and that's something that he had and not every individual has. So I'll say his bravery. Namibia has shown support to our country in terms of independence and many other sectors. And him being the founding father brought also innovation in the country, Now we're able to access new technology. As a student who's doing computer science, it's a huge advantage to us. Having the country not had independence, it would be like a delay in the advancement of the stuff, the technology we have in the country. So I'm just glad that, we had him. Basically, he was the icon of peace, if I can say. He brought a lot of prosperity and a lot of things. But I'm just grateful that he lived and brought and had a wonderful legacy in this country.
Well, his legacy will definitely continue to live on, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family. This is where we draw the curtains on this week's edition of Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Have a wonderful weekend.